Okay, it's about time to begin. It's a long waited for 4 o'clock on Wednesday the 17th for now the exciting Vision Committee meeting in Canyon City, Colorado. And if we could get the attention of the council members, we might get going. No.
We were doing council-related issues.
I had them on a wild goose chase.
No excuses. I called the meeting.
Sorry. You want to start over?
Yeah, let's start. So welcome to the Vision Committee meeting for Wednesday the 17th, 2017. It is 4 o'clock. That's when we start. And I'm calling it to order. Do we call the roll or we don't call the roll? Okay, so we know everybody is. Great. Today we are going to talk about the U.S. Highway 50 Crossing Committee recommendations from Wilson and Company. So shall we start with one of the Wilson? Would you introduce yourselves so that we know everybody knows who you are?
Sure. This on? There we go. Scott Asher with Wilson and Company. I'm the project manager and have been working with Adam and the stakeholder committee here for the past 6 to 8 months on the project. I have Marcus Coaches with me as well. He's one of our design leads. And Maureen Arujo is our traffic and planning lead for the firm. We also have Dave Watt with CDOT Region 2. He's a resident engineer in the region that's helping oversee this with federal funding. And Scott Schnocke as well as the project engineer from CDOT Region 2.
Welcome. Welcome to y'all and the other two on the end here. Oh, wait. Mr. Adam Lancaster and Dina. Okay. Well, before we start, I did Lisa, where's Lisa? Came up with this from the leadership class of the Chamber of Commerce, and she's presented this to the city. Thank you. It says, I heart Canyon City. Thank you. Someone pointed out there's no tilt on top of the end, but we know that exists. So, don't we? So, this was done by the prison, right? Department of Correction. Oh. Oh, yours is the one with the file in the back. Does that mean anything? I'm just kidding. If we listen, be careful. Well, thank you, Lisa. We'll
Remember that.
Oh, that's right. You're associated with that particular organization, aren't you? Thank you so much. Okay, where do we start? Shall we start with you?
All right.
Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, everybody, for having us here. We've been working with the city and Adam for the past several months, working on the visioning and the planning effort for the US 50 pedestrian crossing study, working to find a recommendation to move forward with. About 3 months ago, we changed the process up a little bit, and we developed a stakeholder committee that was made up of, I believe it was 12 folks from the community, throughout the community that had applied to be part of the committee, and to help us go through that process and consider alternatives and recommendations and move forward. So we're going to go through what the process is, and then ultimately talk a lot about the alternatives that were considered, and right now what the recommendation of the project team and the committee was. So first and foremost, we went through sort of a 5-step process. We had 5 stakeholder committee meetings where we went through the first committee meeting. We had reviewed all the previous research that was done, the data, and previous studies. There were several previous studies that were done. We then, from there, reviewed the goals overall of what the goals of the project were to make sure we were on the same page to understand what we were trying to accomplish. We developed a range of alternatives and concepts to be considered through that, did an evaluation of those alternatives. And between steps 4 and 5 really is where we had the public open house and presented what the initial concepts were and got public feedback. And then our last meeting is where we developed what that recommended alternative was in preparation for presenting to you all here today. So we had like I said, in the research and data collection, we went through an overview of all of the previous studies and summarized existing conditions, got some additional traffic information results and analysis. What we really wanted to do is we were trying to, as the committee and as the project, build off of the plans that had already been done by the city. So we were, looking at and wanted to make sure we were being consistent with the downtown strategic plan that the city had done, the US 450 corridor plan that was done a couple of years ago, looking at the draft Arkansas River Central Corridor plan that was ongoing, as well as the Eastern Fremont County Trails Open Space and River Corridor Master Plan. Those are all plans that had were overlapping and had a relationship to what we were looking at here, and that was sort of the basis for where we started. So some of the key ideas out of the downtown strategic plan were, we wanted to have that quality and safe pedestrian environment. That was one of the key components. And looking at pedestrian crossing of US 50 with the connection to the parks and the riverfront trails and the Railroad Rail route was an important piece of that. And that's something we carried through. We also were considering the entry streetscaping along US 50 west of First Street. That's part of what was coming out of the downtown strategic plan. And also the wayfinding signage from the historic downtown was a component that was also being considered. The US 50 corridor plan had sort of taken the downtown plan as well and sort of expanded on it a little bit, where US 50 really was a spine connector between Main Street and the Arkansas River, and really, where everybody's coming through. It almost acts as Main Street, even though it's not. We wanted the downtown gateways at First Street. It was one of the key components, as well as further down at 15th on the east end. Also had 4 options in the US 50 corridor plan, which we used as a starting point for the alternatives and concepts, being the modified 5-lane concept, a 4-lane offset with a cafe zone, and a 4-lane with medians. The US 50 corridor plan also identified that need for wayfinding, very similar to what the downtown strategic plan was. The draft Arkansas River Central Corridor plan, some of the key concepts that came out of that were integral to our study was the primary gateway features at First Street was becoming a pretty common theme. The planning extends across US 50 between First Street and 3rd Street, so it was sort of that downtown area. It's also a visitor arrival as shown in Veterans Park. So, you have a lot of people coming from the west, and that's sort of the first thing they see is Veterans Park as they're coming into town. And they also had an idea and a concept of an overpass at 3rd Street that was being considered. The Fremont County Trails Open Space Plan, they looked again at, their key concepts being 3rd Street crossing to trails and open space, and the 9th Street crossing to trails and open space. So we wanted to sort of keep that consistent and work with how they were looking at getting the access from the trails to the downtown area. So the study area itself, really when we started was from 3rd Street to 9th Street. We expanded that a little bit to include 2nd Street. As part of the project, we figured it made sense to look a little bit further to the west. It includes the signalized intersections at 3rd Street and 9th Street. It includes both sides of US 50. The other extents of it, extends north to Main Street and south to the Arkansas River. So it's really that same, very similar footprint to what the US 50 corridor plan was, however, just concentrated to this downtown section. So as we get into sort of looking at the existing conditions, the speed limit in the area is posted at 30 miles an hour. It's currently a 5-lane section that includes 2 through lanes in each direction plus a 2-way left turn lane in the center, with basically unfettered access between 3rd Street and 9th Street. There is a signalized intersection at 3rd Street and one at 9th Street. If you recall, the history there is I believe there was a signal originally at 6th Street. When there was a desire to move or signalize 3rd Street, they actually moved the signal from 6th Street to 3rd Street, probably about 10 years ago. about 10 years ago. There also are attached sidewalks that are varying width and don't meet ADA standards and aren't compliant right now in several areas. And the ramps, several of the ramps, pedestrian ramps, are not ADA compliant. Neither are the driveway crossings due to the cross slopes. There is just basic highway lighting along the corridor, pretty minimal, but that does light the roadway. And then there is some sign clutter throughout the corridor as well. So a couple of things here. This graphic is showing what the current capacity of a four-lane capacity of the roadway is. Generally around 36,000 vehicles a day is what the current capacity of a four-lane facility is. We looked at what the existing traffic counts were, as well as the projected traffic counts, to determine if there was any opportunity to actually reduce the amount of through lanes on the highway. One of the things you can sort of see here is as we start getting east of 4th Street, especially when you're looking at 2040 projections in the horizon year, your capacity does start to exceed pretty significantly what the capacity of just a two-lane facility would be. So we decided and determined at that point that, you know what, taking a lane of capacity out really wasn't an option in order to improve the pedestrian access. Whoa, that one's not showing up very well. One of the I think it's the color on this isn't showing up on the screen. However, basically what you can sort of see, this is a distribution of traffic throughout the day. And I don't know why that won't show. Do you know when that starts, Maureen? Yeah. Okay. So over here on the left is sort of the 12 midnight, and it goes hour by hour. One of the key things to show is that you get into the morning rush around 7 a.m. and beyond, the traffic volume stays pretty consistent throughout the day. You don't have a typical peak and valley like you see in a lot of cities and roadways where you have commuting traffic, a lot of different commuting. What you're seeing here in Canyon City is really, it ramps up in the morning, stays pretty consistent, and then by 7 o'clock at night, it starts to ramp back down again to a lot less traffic. So you're dealing with a pretty consistent flow of traffic throughout the day along the corridor. We also went through and did pedestrian counts of where people are crossing the roadway currently and those volumes. You can see that the highest crossing right now is at 3rd Street, which is where we expect with the railroad access to the Royal Gorge Railroad, as well as downtown there. So that's where we'd expect. And the weekend crossings are generally higher across the board. That's what the green is a Saturday peak. The black is the weekday afternoon peak, and the blue is the weekday morning. So you can sort of see during the week, there's not, it's pretty sporadic through there, but there's more crossing in the afternoon than in the morning, but still relatively consistent throughout. We also looked at the intersection levels of surface to determine what things are really looking like and what the traffic was happening, so we understood what changes might impact traffic. And traffic analysis, and you look at the operations, is determined on what they call level of service. And it's defined by the average delay that a vehicle has, with level of service A being obviously the best, pretty much free flow traffic, to level of service F, which is where you're pretty much at a standstill and stop and go. As we go through our intersection analysis here, in general, at our peak times at 2nd Street, we looked at, generally speaking, we're oops, hopefully I don't lose it. Yeah, so just sort of an example of what the volumes are looking like and the level of service. We can see that your traffic is heaviest and the volume is heaviest 9th Street and east of 9th Street. It starts to tail off as you go to the west, where you're, 21 to 24,000 vehicles per day east of 9th Street, and by the time you get to 3rd Street, you're between 15 and, 12 and 17 here, I guess, at 2nd Street. So you can see we have a lot of traffic that does start to fall off as you go west through the corridor. So one of the other things we wanted to do with the stakeholder committee, and we worked through, was reviewing the goals for the project of what really were the goals, what were we trying to accomplish. The city had originally provided goals within the original contract documents of what the goals overall were. We worked with the committee to refine those goals, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then ultimately, through those goals development, we developed criteria that we would use for screening the alternatives to develop what is the best solution as we move forward. So the original goals were relatively broad. We're looking at enhancing safety and increasing bicycle and walking activity, maximizing investment to the network, investment in network connectivity, improving state and regional economy, expand recreational opportunities, enhance quality of life, improve public health, so on. And as we went through that with the stakeholder committee, we were able to expand on that some. So when we're talking about enhancing safety, we just, we refined those goals to be a little bit more specific to include pedestrian safety, vehicle safety, bicycle safety, consider emergency operations, so like emergency vehicles being able to get through the corridor. Security overall, there was a concern with vagrancy and making sure that we're not doing something that would encourage vagrancy in the city here. And then security from a standpoint of making sure that things are open and feel open and safe to people. Other things, when we looked at maximizing the transportation network investment, is looking at the connectivity improvement of, is it an immediate benefit to the public? And that was something that was important, is there a need, is there an immediate benefit to folks? As far as the improved state and regional economy, it was, does it, how will it affect economic development and redevelopment? Promote active use of both sides of the highway, so that it's, we're encouraging pedestrian activity and people, wanting to be on both sides of the highway. Easy vehicular access to businesses was important. Better and more access to parking, and a positive impact on business overall, which was important. The enhanced quality of life, optimize aesthetics. That was one thing that came out, was let's make sure we're making it look good. Whatever we do helps improve the aesthetic of the corridor. Create a highly visible gateway so people know they're sort of entering that downtown area. Maximally incorporate highway into the fabric of the city. So it's not, right now it's sort of the, US 50 and Royal Gorge Boulevard isn't really part of the city. It's almost a divider. So how do we bring that together and be part of the city? And enhance the adjacent building aesthetics. And then a couple of the other things was the provide transportation equity, and that was sort of the ADA compatibility. We need to make sure that we were ADA compliant, and making, and that's important for everybody, especially for the city, because it is requirements. We also have the minimize impact on traffic flow, and calm traffic to meet the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There was a perception within the corridor that the speeds are higher, that people are speeding through there, and we want to make sure that that folks are driving the speed limit, and it was important to everybody to maintain a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And then create project readiness was another one. So making sure that whatever was determined was compatible with funding that was available. And again, integrating with the plans and community support. So that was really where we talked a lot about when we mentioned the initial plans, what the initial plans were, and making sure we're being consistent with those, reviewing those, understanding what those goals and outcomes were, and making sure we're not doing things that are in opposition to what the previous planning that was completed. And then we also said we need to incorporate some of the engineering in considerations into that, where there's right-of-way impacts, construction impacts, natural and cultural resource impacts, utility impacts, and relocations and maintenance requirements are some of the things that are day-to-day that will have to be considered as well. So based on the goals and setting those goals, it's sort of what we use to develop the screening criteria overall that we'll review in a little bit. But based on having the screening criteria there, then we started to develop strategies, alternative strategies for the project. There was basically there was a base improvement that we needed to do. At a bare minimum, we needed to look at getting basically bringing up the existing sidewalk and crossings to meet current ADA standards throughout the corridor. So that's going to be improving the crossings, the curb ramps at the intersections, as well as improving the access across all the driveways to make sure that they meet ADA compatibility. From there, so that was sort of the base. That was sort of the base case scenario of something that we had to make sure we were incorporated in to make use of the funding that is being provided through CDOT. From there, we looked at it as an opportunity of, okay, what other things can we do? What other at-grade improvements and alternatives can we do? And that was sort of the modifications to US 50 roadway, and we'll talk through what those concepts were. And then ultimately there was, well, what other long-term solutions and what other solutions can we consider as well? And that's where the idea of the overpasses, underpasses, and even crossings over the railroad, because getting folks across the railroad and then ultimately across the river is also something wanted to be considered. So a little bit outside the scope of this project, but it was adjacent to it, so we wanted to make sure that that was something that was looked at. So again, the base improvements were reconstructing the pedestrian ramps and the driveways along the corridor between 3rd and 9th Street as a sort of a bare minimum. Replace the poorly constructed pedestrian ramps, gain ADA compliance along the entire roadway, including the sidewalks as well, and in the driveways specifically, since a lot of the driveways right now, there's a few in the corridor that actually meet ADA that were redone, but most of them don't. So in order to make the ADA requirement, we'd have to reconstruct those driveways. The base improvements we're projecting right now being about a $750,000 investment for the project. It wouldn't change the cross section of the roadway at all, so the roadway would stay the same, but it would all be longitudinal improvements on the outside of the roadway is where those improvements would really happen. So then we looked at some other at-grade improvement alternatives. Some of the features, in addition to the base improvements, would be 5 alternatives: relocating existing right-of-way space to be more pedestrian-friendly uses, enhance pedestrian crosswalks, safer pedestrian crosswalks. Opportunities for aesthetic enhancements, and then traffic calming are also some of those benefits. The adjacent property access modifications and increased maintenance cost effort are a little bit of the challenges. So when we look at some of the at-grade improvements, and I'll go through the alternatives with it, but we're looking at, these are the options where we look at adding some medians, potentially changing the curb lines and different roadway configurations. And as we start adding to that base case scenario of improvements we can make, it starts adding up to $1.2 to $2 million worth of investment. And these are sort of the ideas that we were considering. The top one here is basically keeping the outside curb lines the same as they are today, replacing the two-way left turn lane in the median, or two-way left turn lane with a raised median that could be landscaped with mid-block crossings between there. A lot of the benefit in this type of scenario is you have some safety benefits of traffic calming, where you'll make the road feel a little bit narrower, so people will drive a little bit slower. They feel a little bit more constrained. It provides for an opportunity for when people are crossing the road, they're crossing 2 lanes at a time, and they have a refuge in the median, so they don't have to get all the way across the roadway in one fell swoop. We also, with this concept, there's the opportunity to basically signalize it. So you can use a Hawk signal or a rapid flasher to make sure that there's a lot of people are aware that there's crossing there, and you can stop traffic. And people only have to worry about looking one direction to get across to the median, and then continue from the other direction. So you really have much fewer conflict points. Concept B was basically a different concept where we were looking at still removing the median, the two-way left turn lane, out of the roadway, and maintaining 4 lanes of traffic. You would just have to do all your turn movements out of the through lanes of the roadway. What this allowed us to do, and the idea here was, we were able to do a landscaping buffer between the sidewalk and the roadway to separate the pedestrians from the traffic. Right now, at the attached sidewalk, right next to the roadway, it's, people are walking right adjacent to all that traffic. So the buffer idea does really create a more a safer feel for pedestrians to walk through there. However, there is some challenges with traffic flow. I mean, now taking the turn lanes away, now people are turning out of the through lanes. It does slow people down, but could create challenges with just traffic flow of people stopping and having to go around. The concept C was very similar to D, but the idea here is instead of making the sidewalk and the landscaping zone the same on either side, was on one side of the road actually have it expanded. So you could have a sidewalk that was more like 13 feet with a 7-foot landscaping zone, and on the other side have it be 5 foot and 5 foot. This allows for what, we called it a cafe zone, where if you have businesses that want to have outdoor uses adjacent to the roadway, you could have space for a patio or things like that out on the sidewalk area, and it would change the look and feel pretty significantly. Then concept D was, and this is an alternative, it actually was a median alternative that where we consider doing full block medians, where they would actually go, instead of being a small just median at just the crossing location, that would be from intersection to intersection type median. So may see a full median across the intersections. And then concept E was a median that actually would actually go through. There was a multiple block concept where the median would actually go through and potentially remove full access at a few of the cross streets. And that basically what that does is it makes a longer median that provides a better opportunity for landscaping, and it changes the access pretty significantly, where a couple of the cross streets will then become right in, right out versus full access as it is today.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of these alternatives seem to be involve removing the center turn lane. And so what does that do to traffic? I mean, so all left turns have to be made from a traffic lane. And what does that do to traffic flow at the peak traffic times?
Well, on the raised median concepts, what we've done is at the intersection, we still have the left turn pockets. So we wouldn't, the only one that really takes it of having to turn out of the through lane is that concept C, where we've, concept C and concept B, where we put just the 2 lanes in either direction.
All right,
when
so
we have the medians, the raised medians will allow us to actually do the turn pockets at the intersections.
Okay, so these are mostly mid-block concepts.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Basically.
Getting back to what Dennis was talking about, there isn't a business along Highway 50 from 9th Street to 2nd Street where somebody needs to make a left turn going into the business, the gas station, the bank, and all those other places in there. I mean, the inconvenience, in a sense, to those business owners what's the impact of that? Especially also the fact that there's only certain areas where they're going to be able to make that left turn on that. And the reason I bring this up is because we look at the concept with the problem they're having on Highway 50 far on down where this one housing area went in and the highway department's blocked it off so nobody can do it. And we can have some kind of the same concept there, but the biggest problem is going to be, because we do a lot of truck traffic in this town coming through here, and getting rid of that left turn lane and having people to wait to do that, you could really tie up that intersection. You could really have tie-ups all the way back from, say, 3rd Street where the light is, all the way back to 9th Street. You go on 9th Street right now at the peak traffic hours, and Main Street is blocked off because everybody's trying to get there to go across. You have the same problem with the turnaround by Safeway and all that. So did you study the amount of time that it would delay traffic at these turn lanes?
Yes, we've done traffic projections, and Maureen can speak more to the traffic on this, but she did do some modeling to show what the impact of the changes in access would do, but that's something that we'd go into much more detail on in the next phase with the access management plan. Because if you're going to modify access, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the next sort of step with that, especially if we're going to move forward with a median concept, would be to go through an access management plan where we would need to determine how to provide adequate access to all the businesses, how that would change, and what that impact on traffic is. That is something that CDOT would require because it is still their highway, and we would need to make sure that we're not creating a situation that's worse than what's today.
I thought, these are cute. I thought we were talking about 2 at-grades and a possibility of an overpass or pedestrian overpass or underpass. I don't, some of this stuff where you're putting down architecture or landscaping all the way down, you're basically cutting off, again, that side of Royal Gorge Boulevard. Right now, the traffic, it's pretty, but they're going to drive straight through like they are now. And how, something went wrong here that I don't understand. We were looking at 2 pedestrian crossings and an overpass. And this has morphed into something huge. And am I wrong? What happened? What?
We haven't gotten
I don't
there
think
yet.
he's done with the presentation.
Okay, let's do that.
So again, just looking at the at-grade improvement options, this is where we look at the crosswalks of how they can be done. When we're looking at the at-grades with median concepts, where again you have 2 lanes of median with a median refuge and be able to cross the other sections. This is sort of the ideas that we could show how it would be to enhance those medians enhance the crossings of the roadway. So just some different examples of those. We did look at grade separated improvements as well. And features, some of the features there really are sort of that dedicated pedestrian or bikeway structure. It does completely, the benefits of a grade separation is it completely, protects pedestrians and bicycles from vehicle traffic, does separate those out. And it does provide an opportunity for an aesthetic statement, whether it's an over or under. Some of the challenge we have is that without the base improvements and at-grade improvements, limited ability to address the quarter-wide pedestrian concerns. So we would still need to, even with a grade separation, still need to do sort of that base scenario of improving the ADA and the accessibility along the corridor. One of the other challenges was locating the structure for maximum long-term use. There's several plans right now in place that are ongoing that could impact what makes the best sense for a location for a grade separated structure, and it's a big investment. So you want to make sure that you consider where that right location is completely. ahead of time, and make sure you consider that from the long term and what the needs are, what all the different plans are doing, redevelopment considerations, things like that. There's also a significant utility impact and right-of-way requirements when we start looking at grade separations, depending on where they are. Grade separation costs range, would range in the $3 to $10 million range, depending on how extensive you go, how big you go, and what your ultimate goals really are with those. So the concepts we were looking at, one of the concepts, and this was again brought forward from the US 50 corridor study, was an overpass between 2nd and 3rd Street. That overpass here would come down 2nd, cross US 50, tie into the sidewalk system along Veterans Park, which then ultimately ties down to the Arkansas River. It uses the natural topography for the approach ramps, which helps, and the property that's required for this is all publicly owned property that would be needed, and not private property. Another concept that was considered was an overpass on the west side of 3rd Street. Some of the challenges we had with this is we start looking at doing an overpass at 3rd Street, which again sort of connects that downtown corridor, and especially with the railroad on the south side, it is that in these areas here, we have to, because of the grade differentials, we have to figure out how to get the grade down. So it becomes pretty intensive, because with ADA compatibility, you're limited to a 5% maximum grade. So when you're looking at, trying to make up a, 17 to 20 foot grade differential, it becomes pretty extensive. So the potential right-of-way impacts start to really add up with an overpass type option when you're looking at that. There was also the idea of the same thing, but sort of looking at, well, maybe there's an opportunity to do it on the east side of 3rd Street and try and minimize what the impact is. However, we still have those same challenges with the ramping down to get it back down to grade and tie into something. Again, with impacts to the surrounding property. We looked at grade separated improvements at 4th Street as well. One was an overpass option here. Looking at, again, this idea here was considering looking at if you're doing an overpass option, there would likely be the need to close 4th Street and make it more of a pedestrian-friendly mall. Again, we're trying to make sure we're maintaining access to businesses here along 4th Street, so the structure becomes fairly large in order to make sure that we can maintain the alley access, and then have the ramp come down on the north side there, closer to Main Street. But it would convert it to a pedestrian mall type concept. This one again would have both public and private property would likely need to be required to be able to make the grades work for the ADA compatibility. And then another option was considered was an underpass at 4th Street. This is something that ought to be considered at 5th Street. The idea here is, again, with the underpass option, there's two different ways to do an underpass. One is just a traditional box culvert type underpass, where it's like a 10-foot by 10-foot box culvert. That's the most cost-effective way to do an underpass. Is somewhat constrained, and I know there was a lot of concern with the committee of having something like that. The other options are to make them much larger, wider open options that have a more of a park-like type feel, but which require truly a bridge structure. So that's when your costs start to increase pretty significantly, when we have to start building a actual highway type bridge versus a box culvert for that for an underpass. Some of the benefits is that we would have the walkout on the south side. Be able to walk out. Grade actually helps a little bit as it's falling away, so our grades would help on the south side. On the north side, it is pretty tight, so you'd have a lot of switchbacks going back and forth, where you'd have to, again, use the right-of-way of 4th Street, so 4th Street would have to be closed to access in order to be able to construct an underpass in this area. There would definitely be public property required, again, just for the roadway as we're going through there. And the idea here was we were trying to make sure that the alley access remained open so it wouldn't impact delivery access to the businesses along Main Street. So these are sort of the ideas of what pedestrian underpasses could look like. You know, whether it's an arch type structure that goes underneath, you know, an open bridge structure where you have a much wider access in there. You got the grades coming out. You can sort of see again here, this is, you know, the big long sort of approach into the underpass to make up that grade for the ADA compatibility, but it opens the structures up like that, so it makes it more open. Utility issues, and I guess that was one of the things that with the underpasses that when you start going underground, you know, you're dealing with all the utilities that are under there and having to relocate utilities like that and have to work with those, which it just again starts to drive the cost up of underpass options. We also looked at some options of some ideas of how do we cross the railroad as well and get people to grade separate across the railroad and how that could tie into the whole plan. Over here at 3rd Street, one of the ideas is, you know, you bring a bridge structure up on along the west side of 3rd Street that could go across the railroad, continue across the parking lot, then come back and tie back down into the trail system and tie into the Arkansas River Trail. It becomes a long structure, but it does grade separate folks to get all the way down over into the station for the railroad, as well as tie in again to the structure or the trail system here. Makes more of a direct connection into that downtown without folks having to do any of the grade or at grade crossing of the railroad. Another idea and concept that came up was the enhance the sidewalk along the existing 4th Street bridge, pull that up or tie into that, and then also come down with a switchback system and bring the trail back down or the sidewalk back down to the parking lot grade at the Royal Gorge, basically at the railroad station over here and in the parking lot to make that access there. So those were sort of the main concepts that we went through and developed of how to handle the pedestrian crossings at several different ways, and sort of the challenges that we were going through. As we went through the evaluation criteria, we worked with the stakeholder committee and had them sort of look at the evaluation with a group as a focus group, that they looked at different alternatives and sort of scored each one of the concepts. We also had them do it as an individual assessment, and then we took that as well and applied some of the engineering understanding and judgment that we have as well into one of those criteria. The bottom line is when we look through that, a lot of the criteria, you know, like I said, the focus group was, you had committee members were grouped into 3 focus panels and evaluated on the alternatives. We had group 1 looking at the base case scenario and then the at-grade concepts. Group 2 was looking at the other 3 at-grade concepts, and then group 3 looked at all the grade separation concepts, with the sort of the results showing that there was, you know, the at-grade concepts were scoring a little bit better. When we looked at it as an individual component of it, we sort of ran into the same issue where we had that everybody scored it individually of what they truly thought from their mind of, based on the meetings, the presentations, the benefits, and what their thoughts were on it. It really did come out that the concepts and the at grade, you know, everything pretty much washed out, but the at grade was still, with the raised meetings, was still sort of raising to the top of the list. And then as we applied some of the engineering judgment in there as well, and took into consideration some of the challenges with maintenance and constructability, things like that, one of the things that was coming out is, again, the at-grade concepts were rising to the top a little bit more, with the grade separated, not quite meeting what the goals were overall, the project, that were conveyed and that would be determined at the beginning of the process. So based on the screening criteria and a lot of discussion with the stakeholder group, there was we developed a recommended concept, or recommended alternative to present to the public as well, and then bring to you all. Some of the features of the recommended alternative was what came out of the committee was basically a concept that was going to maintain the existing roadway width, build raised medians, again with turn pockets at the intersections, provide up to four crosswalks, mid-block crossings between First Street, or I guess four crosswalks between First Street and 9th Street in those areas. And we would actually look at what those final locations of those crosswalks would be as we get into the final design phase of the project, to determine exactly where they would go and what kind of control would need to be done, whether we would use it as a, phase in the opportunity of just do signing with the crosswalks, whether we do a rapid flasher for initial initial warning, or if we go to the hawk signal, which is more of a stop signal or pedestrian signal alone with those. So again, the install raised medians between 1st and 9th Street to provide a safe refuge for pedestrians and calm traffic, provides a lot of opportunity to really change the look and feel of the corridor, that people know that it is the downtown area that you're driving through, and encourage them to stop. The actual extent of the medians would be based on an access management plan. This is where we'd need to go through that analysis and work through the access management to determine how big the medians are, how long they are. Do we need to modify some of the median locations to make sure we provide adequate access to businesses that are there, and working through that process with CDOT. One of the other ideas is that provide for new development, as things redevelop along the corridor, request that they dedicate public use easement and construct more of the detached sidewalk with an amenity zone, with the idea of the committee did understand the benefit of detaching the sidewalks and getting them away and getting separation between the curb line and the traffic, but there really was a real concern with not wanting to reduce the capacity of the roadway and reducing lanes or eliminating turn lanes. So that would have been an opportunity to be able to do that through the redevelopment process if desired. So some of the benefits, provides additional safe pedestrian crosswalks to encourage more pedestrian use of US 50. Right now, it's not an inviting corridor to try and cross. I think we truly believe that if you improve those crosswalk locations, it's going to improve the pedestrian accessibility through the corridor and encourage more pedestrian activity. It provides for a real big opportunity for aesthetic enhancements in the medians. We're able to provide landscaping, improved lighting, and actually with the medians provide a lot of opportunity for us to provide wayfinding signage throughout the corridor. Right now, because of how tight the corridor is, how tight the development is up to the edges and backs of the sidewalk, there's not a lot of opportunity to provide signs out there for directing people to downtown and what's in the downtown area, or to the south side for like the Royal Gorge Railroad. So it provides that opportunity. It does provide an opportunity for traffic calming to really have the road be more designed for the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and encourage and really make people feel like that is the speed they really need to go. It also provides for a phased implementation in with the possible medians, where we could install medians in certain areas and not others. We could, start out the project with saying that these are the locations where we want to do crosswalks, but maybe we don't do it all right now, depending on what the funding is. And it allows for that feasibility of it. We do recognize that some of the big challenges we need to deal with as we move forward would be the adjacent property access modifications. We understand that putting in medians is a big change, and it does change access to businesses. That's where the access management plan comes in, where you sit down and talk to each individual property owner that might be impacted and discuss that and determine other solutions. What are the concerns? How do we, how can we mitigate that if possible? And ultimately, when you put the median in and have landscaping, there's going to be a little bit an increased maintenance cost and effort to maintain the medians and the landscaping in there. Again, with that recommendation of being $1.3 to $2 million. The idea here is that the concern, I guess, of the committee and where we're at right now is that nobody was feeling really comfortable recommending a grade separation at this stage, because there's a lot of unknowns of what that would need to be. And the funding for a grade separation, people were concerned that if we wouldn't have enough money to build it right now, which is a fair concern, and it wouldn't provide the immediate benefit to throughout the corridor that the more accurate solutions would provide. However, it's not precluding it from the future. It's one of those ideas where, again, with all the different plans that are ongoing, I think it'd be premature to say that we're going to do a grade separation at this location, and with the other plans happening, it might need to change. But it is something that we truly believe is something that could happen in the future and would likely be warranted in the future. As things change in Canyon City. So one of the things that like I said, we recognize that access is a big concern. And as we know, this is sort of just a typical type drawing that shows, that right now you have unfettered access to all your business locations. The black areas is representing parking, pavement areas, the brown representing buildings, in different type of, it's just sort of a generic type development. So right now, you do have that access. It's unfettered in and out. When we look at adding medians, it does change access. And how can that access be changed? Well, in areas where you have alleys, you can still provide that access, right in, right out access through the alley, or people turn left in on the cross street, access the alley, and then be able to access the parking lots from behind. Very common scenario in a lot of downtown areas and overall in urban areas. It still allows folks that if they want to turn left out, they can go out through the alley, go to the cross street, be able to make those left turns, those full movement access points, which is really where people expect that to happen. Yes, sir?
In that situation, you've got somebody that's pulling a 15-foot camper behind their pickup, and they got to go out and they got to go around through an alley and this and that. I'm not sure that's going to work, unless there's something you can tell us different.
Well, and it depends. You're right. I think sometimes the alley access works well.
And then delivery trucks also.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times delivery trucks do use alley access. That's what they're intended for, especially for in downtown areas, is they use the alleys to provide their deliveries instead of parking out in front of and blocking the streets. But yes, that is something that is through the access consideration we'd have to look at. Is when you look at each property owner of what their major use is, if there is that high demand for large vehicles, well, how do we make sure we maintain that access? And we need to determine that. and maybe the alley doesn't work for that scenario. Maybe there's something else that needs to happen, or maybe in that area. So now, like this area here, like, okay, we could always modify a median to make it smaller, to say that, you know what, we recognize we need to have that access to this business so people can get in, and they can still access it from US 50, but they can still come out and get out to do that left turn out of the cross street. So there's opportunities for having those individual discussions of how do we make sure that access is maintained and provided in an adequate fashion for each individual property owner.
And I think something that we talked about is when you flesh out the design, you perhaps might improve the alleys, particularly where you have parking that you want to access.
Yeah, that's true. That could become part of the mitigation, exactly, is improve the alleys to make sure that it provides that adequate access.
Let Adam do that.
And I don't know, in your concept that you were given with regards to all the stuff that you provided us in that, and you do have some basic cost estimates, but one of the things that I didn't notice, and I don't know if you're able to do that, was when we talk about which one is the simplest, which one is the most complicated one, and everything else. I didn't see anywhere in there where it says, okay, if you go with this plan, your cost is going to be 2 to 3 million. If you go with this plan, your cost is going to be 4 to 5 million. And when it comes down to all this stuff, the dollars are going to play a significant role in which concept we even look at doing, because if the recommendation, this one is the greatest one that could be there, and I'm not saying that it wouldn't be, but your cost is going to be $10 to $15 million, okay? And that's one of the things that I think is very important, not only to the council, but it's very important to the citizens, because the simple fact that if something comes up that's $10 to $15 million, where's the money going to come from? And so that's one of the things that, is my concern. The other concern that I have is this, and I didn't notice on your deals where you're talking about the mediums on Highway 50 with regards to on the edge of the roadways where you're going to build like flower pots and stuff like that. What's going to be the height of those areas? And the reason I ask that is because the simple fact that winter comes and the highway department comes, and right now we have a problem, when winter comes and they go clear the roads, and all the business owners down there, now they've got quite a bit of debris to take care of in that, and so we're looking at, is the height of those things going to come up where now it's an added problem, and with keeping them maintained and useful.
Sure.
Okay, you're wearing me out here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What if we said we want 2 at-grade crosswalks, look further into an above grade, and go from there? This is nice. This is just my opinion. I won't insult you, but we've droned on for over an hour now. I'm wanting to stop this, frankly. Okay?
And you want to have
No,
discussion?
well, let's have
Because
discussion.
I
Let's have discussion.
would like to
Go
have
ahead.
discussion.
Let's have discussion.
Our committee discussed this, and there are pros and cons on all the medians. There was medians suggested like we have at the Orchard and Highway 50 crosswalk where you can drive over them if you need to. There were things brought up about having the flora and the fauna in the middle of Highway 50 and who's going to take care of it. Basically what we were doing is we have CDOT money, we have this study, we have these architects at hand, and what can we do right now to get people across Highway 50 without getting them murdered? What can we do right now? The above grade, the above grade is going to be wonderful and it will be fantastic, but it takes a lot of property to make that grade 22 feet above the highway. The underground, several of us that work in the not perfectly wonderful parts of the city, all we could see was gangs and vandalism, and we do not have the PD enough to keep that type of a situation at this point going. So right now, immediately, it was at grade, getting a couple of crosswalks with hawk lights or flashing lights, some way to slow traffic down so that you can get them across the street.
Well, but you didn't get to that. You got this report, and you give us all kinds of alternatives, and then we're going
Yes.
to talk about giving it to Adam for his decision, I think. Tell me different. Go ahead, let's talk it over. There's no conclusion here. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's what
Was
we
that
discussed.
the intent?
We discussed all that. I think
And
everybody that was
The
on the
intent
committee
was to
sitting
research
here.
out all the options so
Okay.
that we can make an
It
educated
is
decision.
options
So,
that brought to the
We've
city
heard that.
council.
Where do we go from here?
Adam,
Can I suggest something?
Go ahead.
Can we at least make a decision on whether we can or cannot support medians in the middle of Highway 50? If we could, as a group, make an agreement on where we stand with medians, I think that would direct some things.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll start. I can support medians on Highway 50 if we take into consideration the businesses that are
North and
economic
south.
drivers right now in this town. Access to those, if we take into consideration. And what I heard from this particular group today is that they're going to do that. That's
Yeah.
part of the
Yes.
plan. So
Absolutely.
the concerns that we've had with particular business owners, those concerns, they will have a forum and an opportunity to address that. The medians will slow traffic down. So every day I'm out there, the traffic, as we know, it's a barrier. But we put those medians in, and I believe the traffic will slow down. And when we see that traffic slow down, I think it will be easier to cross at grade. I think it's premature for us to not consider an undergrade, at least having that as an option later on down the line. It's not going to happen right away. As we know, it's cost prohibitive. And there's a lot of other factors. We know we need the train's involvement, and we need a lot of unknowns to come together. Just this week, 2 engineers threw out some alternative plans. So it's a little premature for us to think about grade separated options. But I agree with Jim in that if we can agree that medians might be the option, it's going to slow traffic down. And that's what we want. So.
and the parts of the medians were to create a safe harbor for people crossing. If you get some old broad like me that can't cross 2 lanes in the time the hawk light gives you, you've got some place to, don't laugh. You've got some place to stand that you're not going to get run over. You've got an 18 to 24 inch spot there that you can stand and not be knocked over by the semis and the trucks and the smart alecks doing 45 and a 30. So,
Mark, how do you feel about the median?
Okay, as far as the medians, and I brought this up to numerous people before, I run the whole state of Colorado in what I do for a living, and I see people taking medians out rather than putting them in. I think that the middle lane for Canyon City, for businesses on both the north and the south side, allow for people to pull out of their business, to get into that center lane, and then proceed when it's safe. So if there was going to be a median involved, the only way that I think that it might work, and this is just personal opinion, is if it's before or right after an at-grade crossing, and leave the rest of that lane open. Am I making not sense?
Well,
Preston?
yeah, could we find 2 spots and give it a try? You just said
There you
it,
go.
they take them out. Maybe it's like a lot of other stuff. Maybe it wouldn't be acceptable, but it sure wouldn't cut off Canyon City proper with the main street and with the south of Highway 50. You'd take and put landscaping and everything all the way down the median. That's what it's going to do, in my opinion. They already drive through town. So could we find 2 at grade with some landscaping
And baby
give
medians.
that a try? Pick 2 spots. Pick 1 spot as an example to see if that works before we spend a ton of money on something we may have to take out, and sprinkler systems and everything goes with it.
in that middle turn
Yes.
lane
So-
on Highway 50 is very crucial for both businesses
mid-block?
on the north and the south.
So
It is.
it is, but it's also cumbersome, especially in the key blocks where we're talking between 3rd and, let's say, 6th.
Right.
It's very difficult, especially on 5th, coming out of the Shell station, 4th Street. You have a lot of random traffic, and if we're going to throw pedestrians into that area, when you try to cross from the Chamber parking lot to the Shell station, you have to manage 2 parking lots, 3 left and right hand. You have a lot to manage, not to mention the center turn lane where people are also trying to drive into that.
Right.
I can go with the mayor's suggestion as to let's not put medians down the entire strip, but wherever we're going to have a crossing, let's somehow put something.
Put a median there,
Put medians
so it's a
there
safety
they
zone.
slow down.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Why does the median have to be something you have planted in? Why can't it be what we have on 50 now at Orchard?
Very good.
And I
It's
don't
ugly-
know
it's
how
'cause it's
many
ugly and
times
we wanna
I
make
have
it
been
pretty.
forced
Yeah,
out
just a
to
safe
to
zone.
drive over that and not kill your car,
Right.
yet it still gives a separation of highway for someone to stand there and wait for the traffic to
But
change.
it's not safe enough for a pedestrian to have sanctuary and a median that's
someone can
not
drive
raised,
over.
and it's only
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
drivable over.
Right.
One
If
of
there's
the
a-
one of the goals of having the median that can serve multiple purposes, and I agree. I don't want to be cutting off traffic, and I definitely don't want to be driving through alleys and going through huge roundabouts to get to where we need. But if we can have some mini medians, that does have a sense of when we have arrived to downtown. There is something special happening when we get to this point, because often we say people just come through Canyon City and they drive all the way through and they never stop. There's nothing special. If we create an atmosphere that we've arrived downtown, there's something special happening here, traffic starts to calm, pedestrians are able to cross, we have the beautiful scenery and also an avenue to place our wayfinding signs, which we are going to be talking about the next Wednesday general government meeting, I think June 5th or June 7th. We've created some beautiful wayfinding signs that are very exciting to point to where we need to be. I think these medians might be a part of that we need that direction. And it's something that we can afford right now. CDOT, you have $450,000, is that right? So it's something that is
Right.
affordable, and it gives us a chance to
And
look
this
forward
is
to the
something we
future.
can do now, and we can plan for the next 5 years to do the underground or the overground. But either one is going to require acquiring property that the city doesn't have right now, so
Well,
that's
and
something
those are
else
a
to
whole
get
nother
into.
discussion, doing above ground or
Yeah.
underground, and the feasibility of that with the type of traffic we have right now. Oftentimes, we have referenced Durango's Hawk system that they had and the pros and cons of those. And so I called the transportation department in Durango and got some more information from them. And as far as at grade and their discussion of doing an underpass, their Hawk system that they have now is because there's one place in particular that's the main crossing for their university students. They have 3,800 university students that are mostly pedestrian or bike walkers. And for that connection between residential, downtown, and college and all of that. They said the controversy with the Hawk system came is because originally, when a pedestrian came, they could instantaneously cross the street. And they found out that that was a problem with backing up traffic. Every time someone approached the highway, their highway, that traffic would have to stop. And so they found that they needed to sync the crossing with the traffic signals. And so that they would have to wait up to 90 seconds to be able to have their turn to cross the street. And so going from having instantaneous satisfaction of crossing the street to having to wait up to 90 seconds created some controversy for the pedestrians. She said if they could do it all over again, if money wasn't an issue, they would probably do an underpass. They aren't doing one right now. They've talked about it, but they're having some problems with the fire station possibly moving, and so that's on hold. their purpose of doing underpass was because they actually wanted to separate the pedestrians from the bikes. It wasn't about the roads, it was pedestrians and bicycle riders. If money was an issue, they would do underground. But money always is an issue, and for them, and they still think that the at-grade is working well for them, but they would have preferred, looking back, maybe the instantaneous crossing was not a good way to go because of the backing up the traffic, and then it got the citizens used to something that, and then the change.
I understand.
So
No,
that's what-
I don't think raised mediums is going to slow traffic down. It just won't, okay? Because the people.
That's an opinion, but there's
Okay,
scientific
I understand that.
evidence that
This
says
is,
it
this is a
does.
highway. This is a highway, okay?
Yes,
And
and
you
they
don't,
are on
you don't
highways
slow
in
down
other
people
cities.
on a
Okay, we're not
highway. I
gonna
don't
get
care
into a
what you do.
debate.
You could put grooved marks through the whole Highway 50 corridor, and you're not gonna slow people down, okay? I don't have a problem with killing the left turn lane, but don't stick a medium in there. It's not gonna slow them down.
Just
Okay,
talking
but
to
here's the
many
thing about it too.
medians.
Here's the thing about it too, Ashley. If we do all that stuff, yeah, it's gonna look pretty. But guess what? They're still gonna drive through that pretty raised medium in Canyon City. That's
Frank,
not gonna
Frank,
do it.
Okay.
you're wrong.
All right.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's
Science shows that when
scientific
you,
evidence
I'm sorry,
is what
when
makes their
science
decision.
shows, and all you have to do is look at
Right.
the studies.
Yep.
You put something in the middle of that road. Listen, I appreciate your opinion in the past, but science shows that when you put something in the middle of the street, people slow down. You put a human being in the middle of that street, traffic slows down.
Well, yeah, human being. But
We're
the
talking
raised
about
median-
median and trees.
When you narrow the
When you
lanes
narrow
of
it,
traffic, it slows
People
traffic
slow down.
down.
You know, Frank, that when you're driving down the street and you have an oncoming car coming towards you, if there is no separated line between you, you both slow down. You know this happens.
All right, let's
It will
move
happen
forward
on
here.
Highway 50.
Well,
gonna-
let's just go to the
Going
cost.
back to the
Go ahead.
going back to the medians, Mayor.
Yes,
I think we're getting closer to an agreement
Yes.
that we don't want medians all the way down,
right,
Right.
right,
but we do think that we need to have them where the pedestrians cross.
right.
Well,
Well,
and that's what,
try with two mini medians that don't interfere with left turns and right turns or whatever,
For the businesses.
and let's
Yep.
see how it goes.
And
Well,
I-
it's-
and I
and we
could-
did not
I'm gonna
discuss
make-
medians through the whole block. They
No.
were mini medians.
Okay,
You
Yeah,
said that,
that's-
didn't you? I thought I heard you say that.
let's give Mr. Weed a shot here.
Yeah, see, and the way I like the idea of medians. We'll start there, just so you know where I'm going to end up. This ties into, I mean, we're not just talking people crossing Highway 50. I think it's important that this ties into our whole Highway 50 corridor aesthetics improvement. And I think the medians with landscaping that are not drivable will go a long ways towards that, especially in that 3rd Street to 9th Street, because one of our goals is to get people to realize there's a downtown in this city. And Ashley pretty much hit the nail on the head there and said, when you get to this particular section and there's medians and there's landscaping, people are going to know that there's something different here. This is different than the rest of everything else we've got in town. And now, as far as the Hawk systems, I agree. These the crossings need to be signalized somehow so that it's not just random continuous access to crossing the highway. I think that's crazy because that'll just boggle up traffic, something fierce. But I think having traffic actually stop for pedestrian crossings is a good idea. It doesn't have to be a real long time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's possible, but and again, they can explore that. If that's possible,
Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah,
great. We can talk-
absolutely.
Yes.
having just that, again, I was looking at it today. This man, he couldn't move faster than 1 mile an hour. He went ahead and walked halfway across, but he's standing in the middle of that highway. If we can at least put something there that he again only has to look one way and deal with just the whatever, it makes sense. So I get the point with the Hawkeye. I mean, yeah, it's again, pedestrians are the worst. You inconvenience them, they're just going to jaywalk. So we want to
All
find
right,
that happy
let's
medium.
talk about
You could
two.
have been talking about me because I was standing in the middle of the highway today twice.
It was you. It was you.
And I can't move real fast right now.
But I felt
Let's
bad, and
start-
so yeah.
Let's start out with numbers. Would we like to agree on, for a trial, a design for two that would be protective of pedestrians so they could make it to the middle? The rumple strips and everything else, they're going to be driven over, but something that would hopefully stop a vehicle from running into someone in a safe zone.
Mayor,
Yes.
can we invest in some type of vegetation for now, since we're only doing a few, to make it aesthetically pleasing, because that's part of our Highway 50 plan?
Sure, design it. That's what they do.
Well, and see, and I wouldn't say, I would say at least two.
At least
maybe
two.
4. I mean, I don't want to just sit here and say we're only going to do 2.
Well, let's just start
but
to
I
see
would
if they
say-
use it.
Well, where are we at? I mean, location. That's the other critical issue, is where are you talking about putting those first 2 crosswalks at?
So the majority of our traffic right now,
The third.
that's the signalized. That's where people default to that, but that's not necessarily where everyone crosses. That is the only safe spot to cross. But we do have a lot of need between 3rd and 9th. So we need to make that happen. Right now, there's not much going on at First. The train is the primary economic driver in this community, so we need to factor that in. But I believe it's between 3rd and, well, 9th.
6th.
9th.
Mayor?
We also have,
Between 3rd and 9th.
Well, yeah, but I
We
mean,
had,
if
we
we're
had
under a
some
traffic
people
light-
that had put their names in to talk quickly.
We hear from
Could
some of our staff really quickly, and then
Okay.
I just want to answer to I appreciate the idea of an experiment, but we actually have a gift of funding right now at this point in time. We want to use that money. The other thing is some of this stuff we don't do halfway. So if we're going to invest in an access control plan, we should do it for that segment of the corridor. If we're going to invest in that, we should do that. A lot of the discussion is really premature. That's what the next phase is. The next phase is picking those ideal spots, talking to the businesses and minimizing those impacts. So that's the design phase. So that's what we're really asking for. That's why I gave you a copy of that draft resolution for the 5th, is really it's just you authorizing us to move forward with the design. So when there's an access control plan developed, that will come back to you for a blessing. And then you'll see design too before we go to bid to build anything. So a lot of what you're talking about, we're taking notes. We are, and we understand the concerns, but it's premature at this time. And I would hate to, especially with CDOT sitting in the room, tell them that we're just going to do a little baby project for an
Ignore that,
experiment, because
CDOT.
that means we're just going to use a little bit of the money that's been offered to us, and the rest will go away.
I have a question, Adam, about the money.
Sure.
There was a plan on there that said the base improvements just for ADA compliance for at the curbs and getting to streets, that's $720,000 alone. And so that more than covers the $450,000 from CDOT, is that right? Even
the
just
four-
to do the basic ADA compliance.
The $450,000 is for design, study and the design only. We have another $2 million in regional priority dollars that we can use, and I'm also working with CDOT to add some additional project money to it based on some other things that we're working on with CDOT. So that puts us still in about the $2.5 million range for construction.
Okay, we have 2 people that put their name. We have some people that signed up to talk, and then maybe we'd have Lisa for a few minutes. Who's the first one on there?
I have Dave McAllister and Alan Drake. Dave, you want to go first? I know,
No.
I'm sorry.
Well, guess what?
You can blame me.
Well, you know, when I first came in, I didn't know what I was going to say, and I still don't. I want to thank the council, especially all of you that contacted me about our concern. I want to thank the committee that worked on this project. I just need to get one little thing off my chest as a business person, is that CDOT has given us $2 million, and we're acting like that's free money. And as a business person, I'm still looking at it as taxes. So there, I said that. I have felt a lot more comfortable with the last few days of talking with some of you that the council and the city is not going to just give a green light for this project. And based on what I read here, that's kind of what I thought they were asking for. I still have the concerns, and I think that I feel comfortable that you will contact the businesses. There's quite a few of us here, and I don't think everybody knew they needed to sign up to talk, but I can't talk for all of them. Contrary to what was told at one time by an individual that said that we business people had been contacted about the project, with the exception of the notification of the public meeting, I have to say that did not happen to me. Now, I don't know about my fellow business people, whether they were notified via letter or verbally, but that did not happen. I feel like lots and lots of money could have been saved, perhaps if the procedural contacting of the business people to get their opinion, I feel like if that were maybe done in the beginning, it would have really helped the whole process. In my particular case, I have the Shell station, and the majority of the studies that were shown did eliminate a left-hand turn into my place, and I do know that, and I don't know if it was because of our representation at the public meeting that did get changed, but you're right, where we put two medians, I'm really concerned about one by me. My fuel trucks, for one thing, cannot come in any other way. They can't leave any other way than what they do without eliminating a lot of parking spaces that we were required to have by city code before we were able to open. We also have 18-wheelers that are bringing Mr. Reich's product for Big Daddy's Diner, for Subway, our grocery trucks, and that doesn't even count the amount of tourists or locals that use our facilities for the dump station, air, water, and trash service. So I feel like we do offer a service to the community. I would like to think that we've beautified this part of town a little bit more than what it was before we came in. I didn't build the store. It was a near completed building that the bank foreclosed on, and I bought it from them. So it wasn't something I designed. I probably wouldn't have put a truck stop in the middle of a block without room for trucks. But it's there, and I think that we are serving a need for the community and the tourist. As far as the raised median in front of me, sir, could you put that picture up? The one that... or that vehicle has a chance to even see that tourist, or not the tourist, but the pedestrian.
Dave,
Yes.
you and I talked in length about this. Again, we're just looking at a generic model here, as we know, right? He more than addressed that concern that as they go forward with this, they're going to, there's a bigger plan here that they need to look at, and that's when you're going to be involved.
I appreciate that, Scott. I need to share with you, I've had 2 bad experiences in the past where
Mention those.
plans were brought to me and they did what they were required to do as far as contacting the businesses, but I'll guarantee you it was a done deal before they came to me. Now this may be different because it's directed by you, and I do feel more comfortable with that. But on previous projects, I'll guarantee you I didn't have any say-so on that. So,
Adam, regarding that concern, at anything that happens here, this is going to have to come before us? Is that what I'm hearing? So you have 7 voices here.
Well, I appreciate that.
That you have an
Scott, that's not in what the agenda said, and that's why I was a little nervous
No,
about
that's
it.
fine,
So,
you know, and again-
but you've made me comfortable, Kathy. Gosh, most of you I've visited with, I know everybody up here now. So I think I've exceeded my 3 minutes, haven't I, Dennis? So, do you have any questions for me? I mean,
if anything, when you and I met, you shared some of the problems and some of the issues that were unrelated to necessarily the design here. We'll address those as a council later on, but more importantly, you're going to be involved from here on out, and you're going to have the ear of council, whether it's this existing council or the future council. You're going to have their ear because ultimately, we're going to be the ones that make this decision.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I was just going to say, I think we're approving a concept. The real key part comes next when it's the analysis and design. And the businesses will certainly be taken into consideration in that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I reiterate while we're here? I think part of Dave's concern and my concern is the fact that we're all talking about that we're going to give consideration to the businesses. And there's 2 factors. Up to this point, to the best of my knowledge, Johnson has not contacted a business on Highway 50 regarding this plan. And 2, the Colorado Department of Transportation, unfortunately, does not have a very good history of working with those customers along the highway and recognizing and trying to correct their concerns. So from my standpoint, those are significant factors.
From a
Thank you.
committee member standpoint, they were nothing more than helpful and gracious and very patient, explaining to us how things work. And so from a committee member point of view, I don't find that that's going to be a problem.
If the Department of Transportation says that we're going to put a 100-foot median beginning at 3rd Street, what are our options?
They can do that today.
Yeah.
I agree.
They could do that without our input. That's the great thing about this
This
is
is
that
a
we're
local
They're
involved.
agency
working
project.
with us.
They are dealing with us.
Yeah.
They are here to give us money that exists right now. Given the state of the state.
Yeah, we've all paid for, but
Yep.
it's being spent here instead of Denver.
Yep.
So we have an opportunity to get this right now, and
Do it
I
the
think
way
we've
we
all
want it
agreed that
done.
we're stepping away from the grade separation idea, so they're not going to focus on it anymore. But we need to improve Highway 50. Can we? And Adam has said that, hey, let's not aim too low. Let's do the whole thing. Let's come up with a plan. Can we move forward on that? And involve the
Mark,
he's saying,
Yeah, Mark's saying, yeah.
Mr. Drake, did he want to talk? to-
Nope, I'm just saying, you're
No,
right.
no,
You're
you-
right.
Let's
Yep.
be
Point
done.
taken.
Let's move
Yep.
forward with
Let's
this.
go with
There's
it.
The
one more.
committee did what they were supposed to do. They came with it. They came and gave us a suggestion. They came with their recommendation. It was at grade, and that's where we are.
So we massage this and get the designs that they come up with and see
And
what
let's
works
involve
for everybody
Dave.
Has
else.
the
been
other-
included
yeah.
after everybody has been spoken to and the departments
go.
all do their job.
And rock on.
We
Then
got
they
another
bring
one that
to
wants
us.
talk.
We know the person that put a name in to speak, so Mr. Drake?
Thank you for your time. Dave went over a lot of the things that I wanted to say as well. But I want the committee and the council to understand that we also were interested for the betterment of Canyon City, for downtown, for the whole community. This is not a selfish consideration that we are bringing to your attention, but we do want the best for Canyon City as well as downtown, because we know that we need to, downtown needs to be recognized, and we do need to make sure that our citizens are very safe.
I think that's all we're going to ask those business owners, is that there is going to be some compromise. We need to get pedestrians safely across that highway, and we need to increase traffic between the two sides. Because as we know, that is the most difficult thing to cross in Canyon City right now. It's harder than
We're
the
also
river.
very grateful to hear that there's going to be some open dialogue, and that our opinions will be considered and will be taken seriously. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Did Lisa
Mayor-
want to have a few minutes quickly? Thank you. In advance.
Lisa, don't hurt our people there.
Just about to say, I'm beating people up. I just wanted to say that Preston had mentioned talk about doing 2 crossings. I want to remind everyone that one of the 4 crossings that they're discussing on this is already a crossing on 3rd Street. So are you considering only 1 more crossing, or are you considering 2 more crossings?
Back to
Lisa,
council.
we're going to look at the
Let's just
whole
figure that out.
corridor.
The committee
thing.
looked
Oh, wait a
at
moment.
three mid-block crossings.
And you guys are proposing 5.
Well, on this, they proposed a total of 4, with 1 being 3rd Street.
Street.
So Preston had suggested we might consider 2, so I wanted to make sure.
that was incorrect. It was 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we're
what
with Adam.
we talked about is we had the existing crossings at 3rd and 9th would remain at those existing signalized intersections.
Yes.
We had 3 between 3rd Street and 9th Street. The committee talked about also recommending a crossing at 2nd Street, right out here by City Hall, to go across to Veterans Park. And so that was the 4th one that was where we said between 1st and 9th, there'd be 4 additional crossings from the 2 signalized crossings today.
And again, at the beginning, I was all for grade separated, but if we start putting in these medians and some vegetation, and we have more crosswalks and signals, traffic will slow down.
And I want to support what you have talked about, and thank you for considering the businesses, because one of the things that we talked about, and I was pretty firm with them on, was that making sure that our medians were short to provide safe access across the road and not to infringe on ingress and egress to our businesses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lisa. Is anybody here from the train would like to speak or not?
I'm Rich Millard. I'm a new assistant general manager at the Royal Gorge Railroad, and I came from Durango, lived there for the last 25 years as an operations manager on the railroad down there, so I just got to see exactly this happen in Durango. And my design background, I have a degree in architecture, and I'm really happy if anybody has any questions about what had just happened in Durango over the last decade. There are the parallels between the river, Highway 550 in Durango, between Durango and Silverton, and the downtown historic district. The parallels are pretty amazing. And just one real quick thing I wanted to point out. Durango did put medians, those medians up and down 550 through town. And in some areas they were successful, and in some areas they caused a huge traffic snarl. For example, they didn't take into account, like we have our railroad here, that the train departs at certain times during the day, and so you have this influx of cars coming in and out of the railroad parking lot. You can build those concrete medians, and you can even have some turn pockets that only hold 2 or 3 vehicles, but we had 20 to 30 or more vehicles wanting to get into a turn lane to turn so they could get into railroad parking access. So what happened is they put those beautiful landscape medians in, and everything was really pretty. But once those turn pockets were filled, the traffic would back up into the main flow lane for, at times, I would count 5 to 6 blocks. And you created this huge traffic snarl that just bogged traffic during those times of the traffic coming in and out of the railroad parking lot in Durango. So just something to consider. You know, if we're going to put medians down the boulevard here, and it's great that you're going to talk to businesses and you can provide those accesses and the turn pockets, but in some cases, extraordinary cases like we experience when we have these peak flows of traffic coming in and out of like the railroad lot, it's going to be a mess. So just to consider, you can provide the access, you can provide the turn pockets, but when you have that many cars coming and going all at the same time, unless you have a couple blocks worth of that people being able to sit in a center turn lane and be out of the traffic, it's going to be difficult. I mean, I'm sure there's ways we can work around it, but I'm just providing the experience that I just had in Durango with that.
Durango address that issue?
They're going to remove a block's worth of the concrete medians they put in to start with, and that'll help near College Drive there.
So can you be a part of this study and design?
I would love to, yeah. I have
Taking
some
that
great
into
input for
consideration.
that, so yeah, you can contact me at the railroad. But yeah, it's, you know, Durango, Canyon City, both about the same population, the Animas River, the downtown historic district, having a highway right in the middle, the parallels are just uncanny about what we did and what they learned and what they would like to do now. Like you mentioned, yes, underground, putting a pedestrian access underneath. As soon as River City Hall goes away, I know the railroad donated some land so they could build a ramp down on one side. It's going to be so much better.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about this resolution. Is that something that you want to proceed on? And if so, do you want to modify it or do you want to sign it as is? Agree with it as is.
It would be a recommendation of committee. It would have to still go to council. So
We
you wouldn't do
recommend-
anything tonight.
Mr. Meisner?
I think I could support this, and Dave can maybe give me a nod, but I could support it if in the middle paragraph, whereas, where we talk about the specifics, where it says up to 4 crosswalks will be installed across US 50 between 1st and 9th Street, raised medians, and I would ask that we insert raised medians that will be approved by council will be installed to provide safe refuge.
I can support that.
I can too.
Well, if I say I can, and I will, that's 4.
Do I have to break the tie?
That's enough to move on then.
Jim, let me repeat
Guess
that.
what,
You want
guys?
it to say raised medians that will be approved by council will be installed to provide.
Right.
Okay.
My point is, this whole discussion is that the medians are the issue, and that this group will approve those medians, and I just want that verbiage in this.
CDOT's here. Can I ask CDOT just with a nod? Is that okay? Where's
Oh.
the CDOT? I mean,
We got the nod.
He's
yeah.
nodding.
Are we
No,
okay?
no,
Is that a
with
yes
that?
nod or a no
I
nod?
saw that. I think that was on camera too.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll correct it. It'd actually be in the resolution, not in the whereas. It'll be a direction from you.
And in line 1 after city engineer says initiate and access instead of AB.
Yeah, I'll maybe in the 1 and 2, maybe I'll add a 3 that explains the next steps where you will have approval.
Okay,
And we'll correct the typo.
the typo. Okay. So we went ahead and voted to get Adam to get it back to us at a council meeting for our discussion
June 5th, I hope.
on June 5th.
Yes, and I would just like to mention June 5th, and we have a lot of our committee members here in the audience today, and I want to specifically thank each and every single one of you for the time that you put into this study and the heart that you put into this study, and for your contribution to our city. And that at that June 5th meeting, that we also want to officially give you that recognition for your time and your talents that you have given to Canyon City in this project, and invite you to come back at that meeting. at that
And I
time.
do want to thank CDOT for the money. I really do. Yes.
We are very grateful for
Because
that
this
$2
might be the
million.
last time that we see for a while.
Once again, thank you folks for being involved. It's something
All right.
that we started out with, bringing people in and getting opinions, and it's working, and it's working very well, and has worked very well on several projects. Thank you.
I want to make one last comment before here. I think what we're doing is okay. They've heard enough talk
Okay.
about everything to take into consideration. But on the June 5th meeting, I will rely on my other council members to make the right decision, as I will be taking my wife. We're going to celebrate our 52nd anniversary, so you guys have to make the right decision, okay?
That's older than I am, Frank.
We will. Thank you. And thank you all for coming, and thanks again, and we're done. I'm adjourned.